Let me start with a simple observation from social theory. As Michael Foucault said, the most powerful expression of power is when power is not manifest. It is when power is not expressed through force. It operates through language, through relationships, and norms that feel natural, even caring. That insight matters when we examine one of the most common phrases used to describe organizational culture. And all of us have heard it. We are family. Yeah. In many workplaces, this phrase is used to signal care, I suppose, cohesion, even, and shared purpose as a family. It resonates in a relational society where belonging, loyalty, and collective identity are deeply valued. However, when we examine this through a power lens, where family is not a neutral cultural statement, it is a framing device that reshapes expectations, behaviors, obligations, and even boundaries at work, often in ways that advantage the organization more than the individual. Organizations are not families. Let's make that clear. They are structured systems of authority, of accountability, and mutual exchange. When family language is used to describe organizations, power becomes less visible, not less present, just less visible. The first risk then becomes the erosion of professional boundaries. You see, in families, obligations are moral and emotional. In organizations, they are rather contractual and time bound. When a workplace frames itself as a family, normal professional boundaries begin to appear unreasonable. And this you can relate with. Someone who says, I will join the meeting after lunch, it's currently my lunchtime, let's say, may be perceived as uncommitted. And someone who leaves work at the official end of day, at 4 or 5, whatever time applies for you, may be labeled as, say, inflexible. And an employee who declines weekend work because it falls outside their role may be told, this is not how family behaves. So the statement is used to whip you into line, in the manner of speaking. These are not extreme cases. They are ordinary, everyday moments where reasonable limits are reframed as lack of commitment. So over time, what happens is this is normalized. The overwork is normalized and it discourages rest and subtly punishes people who attempt to protect their time. So what looks like dedication is often compliance shaped by fear, particularly in labor markets where exit options are limited. So indeed, Foucault was right. The most effective expression of power is power that is not framed as cohesion. So the risk here is on accountability. Families prioritize harmony, but for organizations, what should be prioritized are standards. And in cultures dominated by family language, accountability becomes selective because poor performance is excused on account of someone being a good person, right? And misconduct is handled quietly to avoid embarrassing a person. And we justify favoritism through loyalty or length of service rather than contribution. You hear phrases like, let's not expose him. She's been with us from the beginning. We'll manage this internally. This is an internal one, so we'll manage this internally. The outcome then becomes predictable. You see high performers absorbing additional workload for the sake of the team. We've spoken about this before. Low performance is even tolerated for people who are part of the inner circle. And in such systems, trust erodes because people realize that rules are flexible for some, at least, and then for some others, they are rigid. So it's not the expression of compassion that you see, it is inconsistency that is dressed in the garb of care. And the other risk is that there is the suppression of career mobility. You see, families do not celebrate separation. It's not a good thing for families. That logic quietly enters organizations that define themselves as family. Ambition becomes morally uncomfortable. You hear people actually asking if it's okay to tell their manager that they are applying for jobs, and expressing a or requesting a transfer, or expressing some long-term career aspirations outside the organization particularly is interpreted as disloyalty rather than development. And this happens because we have defined our organizations and culture as families. So when employees hear statements like, after everything we've invested in you, or this organization raised you, implying a debt that must be repaid through staying, they're influenced into staying, even if they do not have any intention of staying. Because again, they need to be loyal to the family. So as a consequence, people remain in roles for years without progression. And leadership will interpret this as stability, when in reality, it is but stagnation. Yeah. So the organization retains staff, definitely, but it loses energy, it loses innovation, and the momentum, it goes on a dive. And underlying all these risks is a fundamental power imbalance. In organizations, leadership controls pay, it controls progression, controls access to opportunities, it controls continued employment. That is a fact. When leaders position themselves as parental figures within a so-called family structure, this imbalance is normalized rather than questioned. Because who questions their dad or their mom organizationally? Corporate dad. Okay. Employees are expected to demonstrate loyalty upwards and accept decisions without challenge and tolerate ambiguity, while authority remains concentrated at the top. In fact, the language of care is exactly what masks the mechanics or the machinery of control. Healthier organizational cultures do not rely on familiar metaphors. They rely on clarity. They are explicit about expectations, about boundaries, about decision rights for individuals that are charged with roles. They apply accountability in a consistent manner. They allow people to be committed without being indebted, to be engaged without being emotionally coerced, and let's say to be ambitious without being morally judged for repudiating familial responsibility. So, when organizations describe themselves as family, the intention may be positive. Maybe they don't know any better. But the impact is often harmful because family language can silence legitimate concerns. Psychological safety also goes to die there, where there is this heavy family language, because it weakens accountability, it restricts growth, particularly in labor markets that are constrained, such as ours. Workplaces can be humane without being familiar because they are not in effect. They can be supportive without being manipulative. And guess what? They can value loyalty without demanding silence in return. And thought leadership requires naming these dynamics clearly, even when doing so makes people uncomfortable. So, are you a family? No, certainly. You are not. You are just a pack of individuals that have been brought together by financial need. This is People on Platforms. Until next time, cheers.